Amidst news of the newly imposed tariffs on Mexico aimed at curbing cartel activities, the Mexican government has acted swiftly, rolling out a revamped set of border measures. With an increased military presence along the U.S.-Mexico border and Trump's tax threats looming large, previously seamless cartel operations have been thrown into chaos, forcing criminal networks to scramble for new strategies. Mexico reacts to Trump's threat. Mexico's northern border is buzzing with an unprecedented military presence as President Claudia Sheinbaum moves fast after tense talks with the U.S. President Donald Trump. With 10,000 National Guard and Army officers deployed, this isn't just show of force, it's a direct counter to Trump's threat of crushing tariffs on Mexican exports.
Mr. President, is there anything China, Canada, and Mexico can do tonight to forestall your implementation of tariffs tomorrow?
No, nothing. Not right now.
If those tariffs had gone through as Trump planned, Mexico's economy could have taken a serious hit. But beyond trade, this move also targets the rampant fentanyl smuggling and cartel violence that have plagued the region for years. At the heart of this operation are Ciudad Juarez and Tijuana, two cities infamous for their deep ties to the drug trade. Now, they're swarming with heavily armed, masked National Guard troops patrolling every corner. It's a jarring sight with officers combing through the brush near the border wall, uncovering hid ladders and ropes left behind by smugglers hoping to slip into the U.S. undetected. The first wave of troops landed Tuesday, stepping off government planes with air of urgency. Ciudad Juarez is set to receive 1,650 officers, second only to Tijuana, which will be reinforced with 1,949 personnel. These numbers alone send a clear message. Mexico isn't playing around. This deployment comes after a high-stakes week, with Trump agreeing to delay the tariffs for a month on one condition. Mexico had to step up its border security. In return, the U.S. has promised to crack down on American firearms BEI trafficked into Mexico, weapons that fuel the deadly cartel wars. It's a delicate dance between two nations, both trying to control a crisis that's deeply intertwined on both sides of the border. The White House has thrown a bombshell accusation at the Mexican government, claiming it has ties to drug cartels. Naturally, this set off a firestorm, with President Claudia Sheinbaum at the center. She didn't just brush it off, she went full force, calling the allegations pure slander and a desperate, baseless attack on her administration. Sheinbaum's response to the U.S. claims has been nothing short of defiant. Talky to social media, she fired back, rejecting the allegations outright. Categorically reject the slander made by the White House against the Mexican government about alliances with criminal organizations. Then she pointed fingers at the U.S. gun industry, saying if there's any real alliance with cartels, it's happening in American gun shops selling high-powered weapons to criminals.
At the same time, I explained the gravity of the number of high-powered firearms illegally coming into Mexico from the U.S. These high-powered weapons empower criminal groups and give them firepower. We also ask the U.S. to help prevent arms trafficking from their country into ours.
Her sharp rebuttal only underscores the deep-rooted tensions between the two nations, especially when it comes to the trafficking of both weapons and drugs. Counter the economic threats, Sheinbaum instructed Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard to roll out Plan B, which is a mix of trade restrictions and legal challenges to defend Mexico's interests. Ebrard didn't hold back either, calling Trump's tariffs a flagrant violation of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, a trade deal that is shaped North American economic relations for years. The economic stakes are massive. Experts warn that if Trump's tariffs actually go through, Mexico's economy could take a heavy hit. The U.S. is by far Mexico's largest trade partner, soaking up more than 80% of its exports last year. A prolonged tariff war could slash Mexican exports by 12% and knock 4% off the country's GDP in 2025, which is an economic gut punch that could push Mexico into a recession, especially with the economy already slowing down at the end of 2024. But it's not just Mexico that would feel the sting. U.S. consumers would get hit too, with prices on Mexican imports. Think of the cost of avocados, tomatoes, and tequila spiking overnight. The U.S. pulled in over $45 billion worth of agricultural goods from Mexico in 2023 alone, proving just how tightly woven these two economies are. For President Sheinbaum, this isn't just about border security, it's a major political moment. Many questioned whether she had the strategic chops to handle Trump, especially after succeeding former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. But with this move, she's proving she can hold her own on the global stage. Her ability to negotiate and take swift action has earned her nods from political analysts who see this as a calculated and smart play. However, even with her show of power, the cartels have not taken lightly the looming threat from the U.S. and the possibility of a stricter border security measure. Mexican cartels' reaction to Trump's threat. The battlefield in the U.S.-Mexico border has entered a dangerous new phase. Why the drug cartels planning to attack border patrols. The introduction of kamikaze drones marks a chilling escalation, signaling that Mexican drug cartels are no longer merely smuggling narcotics and migrants. They are actively waging a technological war against U.S. law enforcement. Intelligence officials warn that these drones are not just crude makeshift weapons. They are sophisticated, remote-controlled explosives designed for precision strikes. Some reports suggest that cartels have even modified off-the-shelf commercial drones with advanced navigation systems, allowing them to bypass traditional countermeasures. The drones are reportedly being launched from cartel strongholds just across the border, guided by operatives using encrypted communication networks to target unsuspecting Border Patrol agents. This brazen new strategy is a direct response to the intensified crackdown by U.S. authorities. President Trump's border policies, including mass deportations and military-style operations against cartel supply lines, have put unprecedented pressure on these criminal organizations. With billions of dollars at stake, the cartels are adapting, turning to asymmetric warfare tactics that mimic those used by terrorist groups in conflict zones.
So with Mexico, it's the same thing. We have a $250 billion deficit, and we have a lot of people coming into the border, and now we've largely stopped that, but we've stopped that ourselves. I think they've done a fantastic job. You've seen the numbers, they've dropped to almost zero.
Trump's tariff move is about more than just trade. It's a high-stakes play to secure America's borders and fight the fentanyl epidemic.
It's a pure economic. We have big deficits with, as you know, with all three of them. And in one case, they're sending massive amounts of fentanyl, killing hundreds of thousands of people a year with the fentanyl. And in the other two cases, they're making it possible for this poison to get in.
The U.S. has one of the most open economies in the world, but previous administrations have been criticized for failing to use this economic leverage to address urgent security threats. Trump, on the other hand, is going all in. In 2023, the U.S. recorded the world's largest trade deficit, surpassing $1 trillion. Meanwhile, the influx of illegal immigrants and narcotics is stretching America resources to the limit. Schools are overcrowded, wages are being pushed down, housing shortages are worsening, hospitals are overburdened, and crime rates are climbing. The strain on social services is massive. Last year alone, Customs and Border Protection seized over 21,000 pounds of fentanyl, enough to kill more than 4 billion people. Federal agencies are scrambling to counter this new threat. The Department of Homeland Security has already begun deploying anti-drone technology, including electronic jamming devices and counter-UAV or unmanned aerial vehicle defense systems. But as cartels evolve, so must U.S. strategy. There is now a growing push for expanded aerial surveillance, the use of AI-driven threat detection, and even preemptive drone strikes against cartel operations deep inside Mexico. The Mexican authorities have also issued a warning to their citizens about explosives near the U.S.-Mexico border, reportedly deployed by cartels in the Tamaulipas region. The discovery of explosives along key trade routes is more than just an escalation. It's a clear signal that cartels are willing to use military-style warfare to defend their operations. New intelligence reports suggest that these explosives, some of which resemble improvised explosive devices, IEDs, used in conflict zones, are strategically placked to target rival cartels, Mexican law enforcement, and potentially disrupt U.S. border security efforts. Law enforcement agencies have uncovered evidence that cartels are leveraging mercenary groups with military training to plant and detonate these devices, raising fears that border security forces could soon face the kind of urban warfare seen in the Middle East. The growing instability has already begun affecting border communities. Residents on both sides of the border are living in fear, adjusting their daily routines to avoid high-risk areas. Local businesses that rely on cross-border traffic have reported a sharp decline in visitors, with many Mexican citizens avoiding travel to the U.S. due to concerns over increased scrutiny and potential retaliation by cartel operatives. U.S. lawmakers have taken notice. A bipartisan group in Congress is now pushing for increased federal funding to deploy more advanced surveillance and counter-terrorism resources to the border. Proposals include expanding drone reconnaissance, enhancing cyber intelligence operations against cartel networks, and even launching targeted strikes against known cartel strongholds, a move that would represent an unprecedented shift in U.S. policy toward Mexico. Meanwhile, cartel propaganda continues to flood social media, fueling an already volatile situation. Encrypted chat groups and underground networks are circulating footage of these drone attacks, using them as recruitment tools to lure in fresh foot soldiers. The cartels are also doubling doubling down on psychological warfare, spreading messages encouraging migrants to disrupt U.S. immigration enforcement efforts. Experts warn that this level of coordination and technological adaptation represents an unprecedented challenge for U.S. authorities. President Donald Trump has doubled down on his tough-on-cartels stance, calling for direct military intervention if necessary. He also signed a new executive order designating Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum wasted no time in condemning the move, calling it an act of political aggression that undermined Mexico's sovereignty. The United States cannot unilaterally decide how we classify organizations within our borders, she stated in a heated press conference, warning that the designation could set a dangerous precedent for international relations. Mexican officials feared that the classification would provide legal justificati U.S. military action against cartel targets on Mexican soil. Now, this explains why Sheinbaum ordered a sharp increase in National Guard deployments along the border and inside cartel strongholds, attempting to demonstrate that Mexico was capable of handling its own security issues without foreign intervention. However, many within Mexico remain skeptical, pointing out that past government crackdowns had failed to make a lasting impact due to cartel infiltration in enforcement and politics. Sheinbaum has also issued a pointed warning to U.S. gun manufacturers, threatening expanded legal actions if the U.S. designates Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations. This potential move by the U.S. could carry significant ramifications for both international relations and the firearms industry, add more fuel to the fire that has long simmered between the two nations. Should the U.S. label these cartels as terrorist groups, Mexico plans to pursue further legal action against U.S. gun makers, possibly holding them accountable as accomplices to terrorism. The scale of the issue is staggering. 74% of the weapons used by criminal groups in Mexico are traced back to the United States, a statistic that underscores the deadly role firearms trafficking plays in violence tearing through the country. The U.S. State Department has been considering a broader designation, including criminal groups from Mexico, Colombia, El Salvador, and Venezuela as terrorist organizations. Among these, the notorious Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa cartels have long dominated headlines with their violent operations and extensive drug networks. The possible designation has raised the stakes significantly, as could spark increased scrutiny of U.S. gun makers and ignite a legal showdown between the two countries. The scale of firearms smuggling is alarming. Estimates suggest that between 200,000 and 750,000 weapons manufactured by U.S. gun makers cross into Mexico each year. These weapons are frequently linked to violent crime scenes, fueling the epidemic of drug-related violence that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands in Mexico. Despite Mexico's strict firearm regulations, which make legal gun owners nearly impossible, drug cartel violence remains a constant threat. Since 2006, when the Mexican government deployed the army to combat trafficking, near 480,000 lives have been lost to this violence. In a previous legal confrontation, a U.S. judge dismissed a $10 billion lawsuit filed by the Mexican government against 6 U.S. gun manufacturers, which sought to hold them responsible for the deaths caused by firearms trafficked into Mex. Although the suit was dismissed due to jurisdictional issues, Mexico is not backing down. The government continues its legal efforts against gun manufacturers like Smith & Wesson and Interstate Arms, while also targeting Arizona-based gun dealers for their role in arming criminal organizations. President Sheinbaum's rejection of U.S. accusations that her government has alliances with drug cartels further escalated tensions earlier this month. She took to social media to turn the spotlight back on the U.S., claiming that any alliances were not with cartels, but with gun shops in the U.S. selling high-powered weapons to these criminal groups. Domestically, the move sparked a fierce legal battle. Civil Liberties Organization warned that expanding counterterrorism laws to include cartels could lead to abuses, including aggressive law enforcement tactics that might violate constitutional rights. Immigration advocates also raised concerns that the designation could be used to justify harsher immigration policies, with asylum seekers from cartel-dominated regions potentially facing stricter scrutiny or outright denials. On the other hand, supporters of the decision hailed it as a long-overdue step in treating cartel violence with the gravity it deserved. Senator Tom Cotton, a vocal proponent of military action against the cartels, called for targeted drone strikes and special forces operations to neutralize key cartel leaders, arguing that these groups had already crossed the threshold from organized crime into terrorism. The cartels themselves have responded with swift and brutal efficiency. With days of the designation, cartel factions began ramping up their attacks against both Mexican and U.S. law enforcement. Ambushes on Border Patrol agents increased, and reports surfaced of cartels offering bounties on American officials involved involved in drug interdiction efforts. Most alarmingly, intelligence sources reported that cartels were actively seeking alliances with other international criminal networks, including those linked to Hezbollah and Russian organized crime syndicates. With their financial operation under greater scrutiny, cartels turned to alternative revenue streams such as cybercrime, cryptocurrency laundering, and expanding their foothold in human trafficking. The designation also had unintended consequences for trade and commerce. The increased military presence along the border and stricter controls on financing transactions led to delays in supply chains, affecting everything from agricultural exports to automotive manufacturing. Business leaders on both sides of the border warned that while the U.S. had a right to protect its national security, the economic ripple effects could be devastating if the situation spiraled further out of control. With tensions at an all-time high, the question now is whether the U.S. will escalate its enforcement measures beyond financial sanctions and asset freeze. Rumors are already swirling in Washington about covert operations being considered to dismantle cartel leadership structures, though any direct U.S. military intervention inside Mexico would almost certainly provoke a severe diplomatic crisis. It is no surprise that the U.S. is working hard to enforce these policies that Trump had promised to put in place by the time he gets back in power. Aftermath of Trump's policies.
But we've suffered under the past administration for years and years. We've suffered with millions of criminals coming into our country. Criminals, people from jails from all over the world. They come through Mexico and they come through Canada too. A lot of them come through Canada, and a lot of fentanyl comes through Canada, and China makes the fentanyl. China makes the fentanyl, gives it to Mexico.
But we've suffered under the past administration for years and years. We've suffered with millions of criminals coming into our country. The scene at the U.S.-Mexico border has undergone a remarkable transformation. Once a chaotic and bustling passageway, it now stands in stark contrast, eerily quiet and sharply reduced in activity. The numbers speak volumes about the impact of the Trump administration's tough stance on immigration. Border crossings have plummeted by more than 90% compared to February 2024, signaling the success of the administration's hardline approach to illegal immigration. In February alone, an average of 359 illegal migrants have been apprehended daily at the southern border. This figure represents a massive drop from the 4-8 apprehensions a day just 1 year ago. The U.S. is on track to record the lowest number of border crossings in at least 25 years. If these trends continue, the number of illegal migrants entering the U.S. could fall to levels not seen since 1968, nearly 6 decades ago. This drastic shift is a direct result of the Trump administration's aggressive measures. One of the first moves was the dismantling of the catch and release policy, which allowed migrants to stay in the U.S. while awaiting court hearings. In its place, a more stringent approach has been enacted, focusing on national security and strict enforcement of immigration laws. Thousands of additional troops have been deployed to the border, creating a powerful deterrent to illegal crossings. A mass deportation campaign has also been launched, leading to the arrest of 11,000 illegal migrants in just the first 18 days of Trump's tenure. The border has become a fortress of national security, with a clear message being sent. Illegal crossings will not be tolerated. Border Patrol Chief Mike Banks emphasized this sentiment during a recent appearance on Fox and Friends, where he praised Trump's leadership and the empowerment it gave to Border Patrol agents. U.S. Border Patrol knows how to get the job done. We know how to secure the border, Banks said. All we needed was a president that was going to empower us, a strong leader like President Trump. The effects of this crackdown are evident along the southern border. In Terrell County, Texas, Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland noted a striking decrease in illegal migrant crossings, describing it as a relief. Cleveland remarked on the dramatic shift from historic highs to lows, saying, "We've gone from one extreme to the other. Extreme historic levels of people crossing, historic levels of low apprehensions. It's very surprising." San Diego, California, which has traditionally been the focal point for illegal border crossings, has seen a similar drop, although it remains the highest region for illegal crossings, with 934 apprehensions so far this month. Even this figure is a sharp decrease from previous years. The relative quiet along the border is a testament to the effectiveness of Trump's crackdown. In addition to the increased military presence, ICE raids have been ramped up across the country, resulting in thousands of arrests. Trump has also taken the controversial step of sending illegal migrant criminals to Guantanamo Bay, further tightening the grip on those who enter the U.S. unlawfully. Deportation flights to Venezuela have also been restarted, after a hiatus caused by the Maduro regime's previous reluctance. However, even with the intense crackdown on border crossing, border violence has spiked. In Texas, Border Patrol agents have been targeted by suspected cartel members across the border, highlighting the volatile nature of the situation. President Trump's decision to deploy advanced surveillance aircraft to monitor cartel activities along the U.S.-Mexico border marks a major escalation in the ongoing fight against these ruthless criminal organizations. This move is part of broader strategy to dismantle the cartels and secure the border using some of the most sophisticated surveillance technology at the United States' disposal. The aircraft deployed in this operation include the Navy P-8S, equipped with cutting-edge radar systems, and the iconic U-2 spy plane. Originally designed during the Cold War for high-altitude surveillance, the U-2 is now being repurposed for the first time to target drug cartels. This shift represents departure from the aircraft's previous use in monitoring Russian and Chinese military activities. Over the past few weeks, these advanced planes have conducted at least 18 missions over the southwestern United States and international airspace near the Baja Peninsula. These missions, which took place between late January and early February, mark a significant uptick in the frequency of surveillance efforts. Previously, these types of missions were carried out just once a month. Of the missions, the Navy P-8S were involved in 11, with the U-2 making at least one flight on February 3rd. These aircraft's capabilities allow them to collie intelligence far within Mexico while flying along the border, providing critic insights into cartel movements and activities. Tom Homan, the border czar, expressed his concern over the growing violence. "I think the cartels would be foolish to take on the military, but we know they've taken on the Mexican military before. But now we have the United States military," Homan said during an interview with ABC News. "Do I expect violence to escalate? Absolutely, because the cartels are making record amounts of money." The deployment of these advanced surveillance aircraft signals a shift in the United States' approach to confronting the drug cartels. With the increased military presence and the use of cutting-edge technology, the Trump administration is sending a clear message. It is determined to dismantle these criminal organizations and secure the border. Now that Trump has agreed to pause the tariff on Canada and Mexico, the threat of tariffs still looms large. Trump has warned that if negotiations fail, the tariffs could be reinstated, and his attention is already shifting toward the European Union. The global economy remains on edge, unsure if the crisis has been averted or merely delayed. The potential impact of these tariffs stretches far beyond just trade numbers. Stu Leonard Jr., CEO of a supermarket chain operating in the northeastern U.S., disclosed that his buyers were already making contingency plans, including stockpiling Mexico's Casamigos tequila and switching from Canadian to Norwegian salmon to avoid tariff-related price hikes. These shifts in supply chains are likely to have ripple effects throughout the economy, creating disruptions for businesses and consumers alike. Financial markets responded cautiously to the announcement. While stock markets experienced slight sell-offs, there is a guarded optimism that the import taxes, which could accelerate inflation and disrupt global trade, will only be temporary burden. Trump's questions to reporters about market reactions as they exited the Oval Office underscored the administration's awareness of key economic implications at play. The rhetoric surrounding these tariffs is a complicated mix of trade and national security concerns. While Trump and his economic advisors, such as Kevin Hassett, argue that these measures are part of a drug war, the tone often drifts toward the language of a full-blown trade war. Trump frequently frames the issue as a matter of trade. Imbalances insisting that foreign countries are exploiting the United States and that tariffs are the only leverage to level the playing field. The uncertainty surrounding the tariffs is not just an economic issue, but also a social one. In places like Skagway, Alaska, where the local economy is heavily dependent on Canadian tourists, the fear of tariffs has raised concerns over exchange rates and the potential disruption of cross-border travel. As one of the top tourism directors, Jamie Bricker, pointed out, the ambiguity of future policies could hinder the fragile relationship between neighboring communities and put a dent in the region's already fragile economy. As the negotiations continue, the global community remains keenly aware of the stakes. Whether or not a long-term resolution can be reached in the coming weeks will shape the trajectory of international trade relations for years to come. With the eyes of the world on North America, the outcome of these discussions will not only impact tariffs, but could redefine the nature of cross-border cooperation and trade in the 21st century. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.